culture war debate with Tim Pool, John Doyle, and Lauren Chen.
You know, it's another piece of media that came out, is very popular a couple of years ago, that was right wing. Squid Game.
Oh, totally right wing. But I was like, wow, this is a huge critique of communism. And I get all
Left wing, right wing are barely even political terms anymore. Almost all my actual opinions are left wing, but I'm called super alt-right Nazi because I call out biases I see. The left also attacks free speech now, which makes me go off on them. Yeah, sure. I'm very much opposed to censorship on the left as well. Also, pretty much all my views are left wing. I mean, I'm pretty pro-gun. That's probably my most right-wing view, I guess. But the right, if you're looking to them for free speech, you're going to be in a world of hurt too, I'm afraid, because they're already trying to ban books that they disagree with, and take out historical books like the Ruby Ridge's book out of schools, and they're going to be pushing hardcore against the critical race theory and gender stuff, including censoring people. We're already seeing this with Ron DeSantis, right? The Disney thing. Whether or not you think that Disney should have any sort of special deal with the government for its special district, whether or not you think that's a good idea or not, they probably shouldn't. In fact, they definitely shouldn't. It's illegal. They shouldn't lose that status on the basis of their political viewpoints. And so Ron DeSantis is extremely anti-free speech. He's not a liberal by any stretch of the imagination. And in terms of being a liberal Democrat, someone who believes in living in a liberal democracy, or believes in liberal values like freedom of speech. Yeah, so not great for him. As for Trump, I mean, he tried to steal the last election, so he's not exactly a liberal either. He's also spent his entire time campaigning on racism and hatred, right? He opened his campaign with, "I see the Mexicans, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, and some, I assume, are good people. Or they're rapists, they're murderers, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, and some, I assume, are good people." That's what he started his campaign with. And it's not gotten much better since. Now, he did tone it down a bit while actually president, but yeah. Also pro-gun, sadly, in a country where they're illegal as fuck. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, come move to the U.S. You know, all the guns you want, pretty much, as long as it's not full auto, or even then you can, as long as it's manufactured before 1986, I believe. I read a conspiracy about fossil fuels not being nearly as scarce as it's made out. It's all fake, like the diamond industry. Mexicans agree with that speech, though. I don't know if they agree that Mexicans are rapists, murderers, and some, I assume, are good people. Or that he only wants people who don't come from quote-unquote shithole countries. Or that we should ban all Muslims from coming to the United States. Like, he said some pretty xenophobic and racist things over the years. Like, that's his playbook. It's not even a new playbook. It's been one that's been used by right-wing authoritarians throughout history. Just play up the evils of brown people or immigrants or the other. The ones crossing the border illegally often are. I mean, I don't think that's actually true. Do you have the numbers on illegal immigrants being rapists and murderers?
all these leftists being like, Tim's so dumb. The guy who made it said it was a critique of capitalism.
I have not seen this, but I'm still going to fight with this take, okay? Ready? I've never watched this thing up.
24. I'll go ahead and turn up the speed on this.
So real quick, there is a place in the most capitalist country in the world, or one of them, the United States, where you can find a scenario like that, and it's prison.
With Sound of Freedom and Bud Light and other issues, I'm wondering if you guys think conservatives, the right, whatever you want to call it, has begun to win the culture war.
the more cynical part of me wants to say no, but I understand that, it's a tug of war, so any ground gained, even if we shouldn't have lost it in the first place, is like positive. The Bud Light phenomenon, it strikes me as very unique. I mean, obviously it is, but I don't think it's because all of a sudden we're figuring out how to fight the culture war. I think it's because you've got Bud Light, which people really weren't married to in the first place. You have so many other options for beers. And then it was something that was so in contrast to the average life of the person who is, drinking Bud Light, to see like Dylan Mulvaney be put on the can. And they're probably like, okay, I don't really like it that much anyway. I'll switch to Coors or whatever. With Sound of Freedom, that was like a legitimately good film. I recommend everyone go see it. To my knowledge, though, they made
To be clear, the Bud Light thing, oh my fucking god. This Bud Light Dylan Mulvaney thing was like the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Why Bud Light thought this would be a good idea, I have no fucking clue. But also, uh, it's become like this weird culture war issue. Like, should they have done it? No. Was it stupid and pandering to this sort of weird audience? Yes. But at the same time, people are making it out to be like this like huge major deal where it's all they want to talk about. And like, okay, it's probably not that either. It's a company that they didn't even make an ad with Dylan Mulvaney in it. They sent them a bunch of beer cans with their face on it. That's basically all they did, which is stupid, but like whatever. Like that's not like the end of the world. Mexico doesn't document its criminals very well because the entire government and police are the biggest criminals in the country. So you can't really say what any of them crossing the border are like. Let's look this up real quick. Crime rate for illegal immigrant versus native population are compared with. Comparing crime rates between undocumented illegal immigrants, legal immigrants, and native-born U.S. citizens in Texas. The study found that undocumented immigrants had substantially lower crime rates than native-born citizens and legal immigrants across a range of felony offenses relative to undocumented immigrants. U.S.-born citizens are over 2 times more likely to be arrested for violent crimes, 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for drug crimes, and over 4 times more likely to be arrested for property crimes. In addition, the proportion of arrests involving undocumented immigrants in Texas was relatively stable or decreasing over this period. The differences between U.S.-born citizens and undocumented immigrants are robust to using alternative estimates of the broader undocumented population, alternative classifications of those counted as undocumented at arrest, and substituting misdemeanors or convictions as a measure of crime. I mean, that more or less bakes. You're basing off the U.S. Yeah, because I live in the United States, bro. Like the United. I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's like in Europe, or if you're in a different country, like if you're in Africa or Asia or Australia or whatever. But yeah, the United States, like we don't. Wait, wait, hang on. This whole conversation started because I was talking. We were talking about Donald Trump, and he was talking about how Mexicans are rapists and murderers, and you said that the illegal immigrants are not Mexicans themselves, but illegal immigrants. Why would I don't know how many illegal Mexicans are in Europe or in Japan or wherever you live, but it would seem that the United States numbers should be the ones that we're talking about, especially since I don't think Trump really cares about illegal Mexican immigration to Japan. No, like I said, I meant Mexicans and I mean, it looks like unless there's other data you've got. I mean, like it looks like they are less violent than Americans. Which I mean, it makes perfect sense that they would be, right? Because these are people who are trying to keep a low profile. They're trying to work under the table, and they're not trying to go around committing murders and rapes and joining gangs and stuff. None in Japan. Yeah, I don't think that's quite the journey. Japan doesn't have like a super lenient immigration system for like legal immigration. So I can't imagine like if you were an illegal immigrant, like you'd be like really under the radar there. I don't know whatever the illegal crime rate for whatever the crime rate for illegal Mexicans, if there's like all three of them who live in Japan, if any, it's probably pretty low since they're probably like really trying to keep a low profile. Nobody in the U.S. government really cares about illegal immigration because they do fuck all about them when they're in the country. 100% of illegal immigrants are criminals. I mean, criminal in the sense that they cross the border illegally, but not in terms of what we actually care about, which is violent crime. All right, like 100% of people who jaywalk are criminals, including me. I've jaywalked plenty of times in my life. Um, but like you would go around and be like, oh my God, Tachyon is a criminal because he jaywalked. Like when people say crime, especially when they're talking about rapists and murderers, which is what Trump said, they're talking about violent crime. They're not talking about people who have committed like relatively minor offenses.
That a few years ago, and they
Yeah,
were sitting
5
on
years
it,
ago.
and they put it out recently.
They couldn't get it out.
And that is a good example of how to actually make culture. I mean, culture literally means just like what you are doing, what you are making. And the right doesn't understand itself, which is why we don't win anything, and especially not culture wars, because we don't know how to make culture. Because if you ask like a right-wing person, hey, make me a piece of right-wing art, they're gonna draw like Ronald Reagan shooting an Uzi, riding a Velociraptor. And it's like, okay, like yes, but not really. If you put that mural up in say Portland, it might get defaced because they hate Ronald Reagan, but more or less it's gonna stay there. You take something that's actually right-wing, like something that is natural and good, like a mother cradling a baby. If you put that mural up somewhere, that would get defaced much quicker and with much more viciousness by some Antifa crazy woke person than would the mural of like Ronald Reagan, because that is what is right-wing, is just what is like natural. Even if you look in like a lot of
cradling a baby would get
What? Wait. This guy thinks that a statue of a mother cradling a baby would be defaced. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, if you go back and look at like all the ancient Athenian and Roman statues and various other statues, like they're not getting defaced. So there's plenty of examples of. I mean, I don't know about specifically a mother cradling a baby, but I don't know how common that is in statues. But yeah, like, what are you talking about? Like, just making stuff up to finding things to get mad about. It seems it's just another bullshit disturbing the peace laws that police. Oh, hang on. Jaywalking cannot even come close to illegal immigration. Jaywalking is not a crime anywhere but the U.S. too, I think. It's just another bullshit disturbing the peace law that cops use to find people or abuse a specific person. Yeah, the jaywalking thing, it's actually kind of interesting because the history of how that law came about, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but uh, apparently the term jay was used in like the late 19th, early 20th century to refer to someone who was a quote unquote like country bumpkin, like someone from a rural area who's supposedly not very sophisticated, right? That was sort of like a derogatory term for people like that back then. And so when people started to get hit by cars, which cars were mostly in major cities back then because, well, they didn't have great transportation infrastructure. So not a lot of people living in rural areas had cars. So whenever people got hit by cars, the automotive industry actually started claiming that these people getting hit by cars, it was their fault because they were Jays and they were jaywalking. So it was Jays walking, and that's how that became a phrase, and I think later a law, because the automotive industry really pushed hardcore to try and promote this idea that, oh, all these people getting run over by cars and stuff, don't worry about that. They're just a bunch of idiots who brought it upon themselves, rather than, okay, we used to have a society where we had mixed-use roads and we had shared, what the roads were for. Like they could be used for transportation, but also for just walking across the street. And I'm sure there might have been some people in the society who like were unfamiliar with this new technology and were like didn't understand the dangers with it. Sure, maybe, but a lot of it was just cars are kind of inherently dangerous to some extent, and yeah, and automotive industry wanted to sort of like downplay the road safety aspect of it because they didn't want to face regulation. Jaywalking cannot be compared to, cannot even come close to illegal. I mean, like, I don't think illegal immigration is good. Like, I don't think that people should come to the United States illegally. But I think that we should have a system that lets way more people in legally. And like, I don't think it's like the end of the world because it does appear, right, that they commit less crime, they contribute to the economy, and most of them just are coming from extremely poor situations and just want to improve their lives. And like, I understand that, and they don't want to wait 7 years because they're living in a god awful shithole right now, at like Honduras or something. And they think, America is this land of opportunity. I can do whatever the fuck I want. I can be successful. I can provide for my family. And so they come here. And I wish there was a process by which we could help people come here legally and quickly, or relatively quickly, not like a 7-year waiting list to get in. I don't know if the 7 years is exactly right. It could be a little bit less or a little bit more, but I think that's roughly the average time it takes to come here legally. Police heavily abuse the get out of the road stuff, even in countries where there's no jaywalking laws. Even in my country, if you anger a policeman and then cross, they'll fuck with you. I mean, yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. The police in the United States are kind of vicious dicks too. I wouldn't really be surprised if that sort of mindset and attitude happens in other countries as well. Maybe the U.S. is worse because of the widespread gun ownership, which I'm pro-gun generally, but the fact that every single time a cop interacts with somebody, that person may or may not have a weapon, and there's like a high or medium to high chance, let's say medium chance that they have a gun on them, it does kind of change the dynamic of the interaction. Whereas maybe like Europe or Japan, where the guns are less common, maybe that automatic possibility for a deadly violence isn't as present in the interactions. I don't know. But I don't know enough about European or Japanese policing or South Korean policing or anything like that. Just want to make sure you don't get hit by a car. Quote unquote, just want to make sure you don't get hit by a car. They say to the person who happened to be investigating their corruption, the U.S. is better because you can tell the police to fuck off and legally be in your right. In my country, you can't even look at them wrong or you're under arrest. Yeah, that fucking sucks, man. Dude. That's fucking terrible. I don't know where you live, and I'm not going to ask. I know people don't want to give out that personal information, so if you want to share it, you can. But yeah, don't feel obligated to by any stretch. But yeah, that's fucking bullshit.
Face?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I don't think that's...
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of,
I mean, anything could get defaced, honestly.
Yeah, but I don't think it was like these woke tards who are like, oh, this traditional family structure.
honestly,
It would be in Portland.
Honestly, if it were a white mother with a white baby, it would. If it were a black mother with a black baby, it wouldn't. But if it were a white mother with a white baby, it absolutely would. I would bet money on it.
I think.
Bro, what? Bro, what? If it were a white mother with a white baby, they would. Like, what world does this guy live in? It's like we talked about earlier, Daylight. We talked about, I mentioned the radicalization, how people become radicalized. Like, I think this guy is like a clear example of this. Like, I don't know this other guy's other takes. Maybe this is like this just one-off weird take he has. And like everything else, he's like totally like within the realm of reality on. But I don't know how somebody could honestly believe that like there's this huge mob of people, of Antifa or whatever they are, destroying statues, or who would have an interest in destroying statues if the statue was of a white person holding a baby. But they wouldn't do that if it was a black person holding a baby. Like, it's such a weird way to operate in the world. Like, I don't know where these people, like where this guy in particular, I should say, not these people, but this guy in particular, I don't know why he would possibly think this. Ireland, by the way, I don't mind. Google knows, you should too. Yeah, I didn't really think of Ireland as being that corrupt, generally speaking, but I don't really follow Irish politics, so I don't know. Like, is corruption pretty common there?
It's fair to say there's probably some higher percentage that you're correct, but I think for the most part, art just gets defaced. And
Antifa destroy damn near everything. I mean, yeah, when they're rioting, sure. When they're rioting, they'll destroy pretty much anything. I don't think they're like targeting white women statues in particular.
I don't think anyone's going to be like, that picture must be I don't think.
Well, I guess an example of that would be, you see this go on Twitter often, where there'll be like a family picture of like 8 white kids and their mom, and just happy. This is ecological terrorism. Something about this seems wrong to me.
Say just having a large white family is offensive.
And even if you look at like the most popular tropes in films, they all are in a way like right wing. I mean, the good over the evil, the strong over the weak, the triumph of good. Jonathan Bowden writes about this extensively.
Right wing?
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like a lot of the traditional media is actually, depending on how you analyze it, a lot of the movies we had growing up was actually the overcoming of toxic masculinity.
That's true. So they will take like a right wing sort of concept and they will redress it to be more egalitarian because they will replace the man with the woman, or they'll add like woke stuff or gay stuff.
Not even. I'll fight a lot on this. If you think of like classic movies, how many old movies can we think of where you've got like
Talk about Top Gun, Destiny. Actually, I just watched Top Gun. I saw it when I was a kid, but I watched it again maybe like 6 months ago, and I found an article that I think more or less actually agreed with my views too. Someone else noticed this as well. It seems like it's something that the film critic community has sort of talked about before, that Top Gun does seem to be a film that is about a healthy form of masculinity, right? If you look at the relationships that Maverick has, I mean, maybe not with Iceman in the beginning because there's obviously that rivalry, and how how Maverick is obviously this very cocky guy who plays it a little bit fast and loose, and then how he, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet, he obviously suffers a tragedy when a certain character has an accident, we'll say, and how he's trying to deal with that loss. Like, it's actually like a really positive view of masculinity. Like, you could see the film through that lens, and I think that it more or less works looking at it that way. That's not to say that's the only way to see it, but I thought it was an interesting interpretation of Top Gun. Daylight says, yeah, the entire country is basically corrupt. It's not as violent as Mexico and would put on a very pleasant front, but the government is a slave to powers like Israel and the globalist EU agenda. The police here, called Garda, have very much taken a side against the Irish native population. When you when you say you said that you don't believe that Jews control the world. So when you say Israel and globalists, what do you mean? I'm not trying to load that with any sort of assumption about what your views are. I'm just curious. Top Gun is about living life as a gay man. Oh my god, that scene with Iceman and Maverick in the locker room. Oh, come on, that is 1,000% you could see it 1,000% in an erotic way. Where he's like, I don't like you, Maverick. You're dangerous. And they're half naked. Oh my god. Come on, bro. You had to say it like that, didn't you?
the hotshot kid, and he comes in, and he's not a team player, he never passes to his friends, and he quits his team, and then he has a day or two off where he hangs out with his friends, oh, you know what, I need to call him. The Mighty Ducks is a classic example. I'm sure there's a ton of other movies like this. And then the guy comes back, and either he wins the game because he's playing with secret passes to the other kid on the team. I feel like that's a pretty classic. I wouldn't call it right wing or left wing, but framed in today's society, that feels like people would view it more as left wing because it's attacking toxic masculinity. But I think there's a lot of classic tropes like that, men overcoming their more.
Yeah, the jockey guy was always the bad guy. It's
the jockey guy was look at Back to the Future.
It's because it was written by Hollywood nerd writers who
you want to know what right wing art is? And I think one of the issues is you're correct. The right doesn't know itself, and I constantly hear about this movie is too woke, so it's bad or whatever. Captain America, that's right wing. That's a right wing movie, hands down.
Yep.
It's literally a movie about a scrawny guy who's trying to lie his way into the army, who becomes this visage of stereotypical masculinity who fights Nazis to save the day. It's pro-America. His name is Captain. That's very right wing. Yeah. Conservatives didn't come out and cheer for that movie. No, they ignored it.
We don't even. We're like a fish in water, unable to detect what is around us. It's like hierarchy, the ascent of hierarchy. This movie is so right wing that I thought it was right wing, and I went to write a script for the video, and I was writing out how it'd be funny if I made this point, and then Mr. Incredible, it's Incredibles, said something that was borderline fascist, and I was like, now I have to escalate it even further. Because you look at that movie, you watch, superhero movie. That movie is about the emasculation. Yeah, it was in the scene when he's arguing with Mrs. Parr about he goes out to rob with Syndrome or to stop the robbery with Syndrome, comes back, and the wife is like, where were you? And they're talking about the school, and he's going on about how the school punishes excellence and no one's allowed to be great anymore. And I'm like, this is so cool. So I'm like, okay, now I have to escalate what he's saying. But it's true. I mean, that movie is about like this man who had achieved greatness and now he's like literally incubated into this cubicle and he wants to use his strength to pursue good, and everything around him is doing the opposite of that. And look at Syndrome, the villain. What does Syndrome want to do? He literally says that he wants to make everyone equal because he's so traumatized by his past that he's like, well, now everyone's going to be super because no one will be, because he was a dork and he wasn't Mr. Incredible, so he couldn't hang, he couldn't stop Bon Voyage, and he's taking it out on everybody else.
I applaud your encyclopedic knowledge of this movie.
Very well.
I just watched the Black Clover movie on Netflix. It's anime, and this is another great example. Matt Walsh ragging on anime.
He also rags on Disney. What's
video games.
what's frustrating about that is that we're not
let me-
supposed to indulge degenerate culture, but then Disney movies are family friendly, and we're
Well, there's Jews against Zionism, so it's not a Jew thing. Israel is a terrorist state run by some of the most racist people of our time. It's just run by the other side of the Nazi coin. Uh, I Israel is a complicated topic. On one hand, they're a very progressive society. They one of the few democracies in the Middle East. I wouldn't say the only one. That's like talking point you often hear, but it's not actually true. Like Rojava is democratic, and you could make arguments that that there are mixed regimes that you could argue are some form of anocracy, like Turkey, obviously, Lebanon, Jordan. They're not quite democracies, but not quite authoritarian states either. But no, I mean, Rojava is definitely a democratic society. Iraq, actually, is a democratic society, though an imperfect one. So it's complicated. So yeah, compared to their neighbors, Israel is generally a better society than their neighbors in terms of being a more moral, more liberal, more democratic society. But what they're doing with the West Bank and the settlement is complete and utter bullshit. That's ethnic cleansing, and I'm strongly in condemnation of them for that. And also, I do have some concerns that their government, with Netanyahu and the general right-wing shift of Israel, is putting it in a more authoritarian, anti-democratic direction, including Netanyahu wanting to get rid of judicial review, though they've walked that back since. Mr. Daylight says, in terms of politics, it's all about mass immigration. Ireland right now is housing thousands of refugees, which is absolutely a strong Israeli I mean, I don't know enough about like Palestinian refugees or something else. Irish taxpayers are paying millions every month to put up undocumented military-age refugees. Meanwhile, our homeless get nothing. I mean, I'm generally opposed to like the sort of like weird populist stuff where it's like, oh, well, we can't have anyone come to this country because they might receive some sort of, economic benefit from living here. Not even like a government benefit, but just like an economic benefit from living in a wealthy society with a lot of connections and economic opportunities because there's like a homeless person down the street. First of all, almost all of the research, pretty much all of the research, including right-wing economists, they all agree that immigration is great for the economy, right? Free movement of goods, free movement of people, like 1,000%, yeah. And I'm also supporting the free movement of ideas. All the economists, including conservative ones, like conservatives will cite David Borjas. He's the conservative economist who talks about how immigration can have some negative impacts on the economy for certain subsections of the workforce. And even David Borjas, he's pro-immigration, but he thinks that there should be government programs in place to help offset. Here's more or less David Borjas' view that immigration can be a net positive for society in terms of economic impact, but that certain cohorts of people who are competing in the same exact sector as those immigrants, that they can receive a relatively modest negative economic impacts. Like they could, I think it was like, I don't quote me on this because I don't have it exactly, but I think it was 2 to 5%. They could see a 2 to 5% income reduction if you're competing in the exact same cohort as that specific immigrant, but that the economic benefits are diffused throughout the entire economy, so that everyone in the economy receives lower costs of goods and services, and receives the economic benefits of people starting new jobs, of people spending money in the economy, and that the overall aggregate benefit, according to Borjas, he was like the most extreme position on this, that they more or less cancel each other out, but that we can make immigration um, more economically beneficial for that small cohort of people who are competing at the lowest end. So you're talking about the absolute like poorest workers rather than like the middle class and upper class and even the lower middle class who all benefit from immigration. But the people who are competing in the various like people competing in the fruit picking sector, for instance, things like that, that they do actually see a wage decline, but that you can implement government programs to subsidize those people and provide them with either job training or new opportunities or some sort of enhanced benefit, or even just find them another position, a job placement that will overcome any negative economic effect. That way, both the people competing directly with the low income immigrants and the people who, and the rest of the economy overall, the rest of society, all receive the benefit equally. And the immigrants themselves receive, of course, a great benefit as well, living in a advanced democracy and a great economy. The crime rate around these immigrant hotels have gone up. It made me want immigration like Japan. I mean, yeah, I don't know what the situation in Ireland is. It could be that certain specific policies should be implemented to, better. I mean, I don't know why we're putting the refugees in hotels to begin with. It would seem that that's sort of like a immigration restrictionist position, actually. That we don't want to deal with these people. We're just gonna shove them up in this like little camp or whatever temporarily until we can get rid of them, rather than Ireland taking smart steps to integrate them and let them work. I mean, I don't know what the exact position in Ireland is, but it seems like it sounds like a restrictionist position actually. This idea like, oh, just shove them all in this little area where they'll just like sit around and not do anything all day. The policy is not to let people with no passports, no background checks into our country. Simple. I mean, yeah, you could try to do that, but you're not going to be successful. I mean, in the United States, the vast majority of illegal immigration isn't even from people crossing the border. The vast majority, well, I don't know about the vast majority, but the majority is people who are overstaying their visas. People who come here as tourists or as temporary workers or H-1B, things like that, and they overstay their visa. And obviously, we're not going to live in a country where people aren't allowed to fly into the United States, right? That would be insane. Would destroy the economy, the global economy. And people don't want that. People want to live in a great, diverse society, right? That's what we love in this country. I don't know about Ireland. Ireland, obviously, a different country. But the United States, we've had multiple ethnic groups living here, and there was obviously some bad shit we did in the past, like putting the Japanese people in concentration camps and um, slavery, things like that. But today, yeah, we're like a great, vibrant society, and we're the most successful country on earth. We're fucking amazing. America is great at integrating people. It's got the biggest economy in the world, the biggest military. It's a highly successful liberal society with strong free speech protections, and yeah, we've got all the benefits of immigration and pretty much none of the downsides. So I'd say it's working pretty well here. Because we don't know if they're criminals, and many are turning out to be. I heard something the other day. I don't remember who it was who said it, but it was this argument that there is this sort of viewpoint that some people have where someone's either like this criminal or not. It's sort of like this right-wing view of morality, where like there's some people in the world who are destined to be criminals and who are criminals, and that's what they are. Whereas the left-wing view is probably more along the lines, or at least maybe not left-wing, but like the liberal view, is more that people people are what the societies around them, and also to some extent their genetics, and to some extent like a whole host of different factors, like their environment and their to some extent their genetics are mixed together to make people what they are, right? So like it wouldn't really surprise me that if Europe is bringing in large numbers of people and then doing putting zero effort in to integrate them and just like shoving them into ghettos, that's not going to produce good outcomes. In fact, that's going to produce criminals, as you say. Whereas like if you actually just like integrate them into society like America does or Canada does, then you're gonna have no issue at all, or very few issues. Bro, okay, I don't know. You keep talking about Israeli influence. Like, I don't know. It seems kind of sus. Um, you say that you don't believe that Jews control the world, but there's a lot of talk of Israeli influence. I don't think Israel influences Ireland all that much.
Adult
No, not all of
conservatives
them.
are, yeah, not anymore, but adult
But-
conservatives can't even watch like wholesome stuff. So we're all just supposed to watch Sound of Freedom all day, every day. Like, what is that?
The Black Clover movie is quite literally, so the story of Black Clover in anime is people
We
can,
don't have a
at a
problem
certain
with
age or whatever,
legal
they get a
immigration
grimoire, a
if
magic book that gives them
most
magic
of the
powers.
time.
This one kid who desperately wants to be a magic knight in service of the
All right,
crown
to be
never
said.
gets one, so he trains physically as hard as he can until he's so physically powerful he actually stands a chance, and then he gets some anti-magic book with a sword, and in the arena where they're doing the test, this is the actual shot of the movie, he has no magic powers, but in the first battle, he's so fast, he just slams into the guy who has magic. Basically, the point of that show is hard work and merit can make it possible. In the movie they put on Netflix, the bad guy literally wants to bring about a new world of equality, and in the great battle, the main character Asta is like, the villain is like, the royal elites are oppressing the
Now, when you
people,
say
and Asta
Israeli,
is like,
what do
no,
you mean?
whether you're a noble,
See, there's
a
the
peasant, a
bias.
farmer,
I
or a
can say
warrior, we're all
Russian
working together to make
influence,
our
US
country
influence,
better. And I'm like,
Israeli
where are the
influence
conservatives to
makes
come
it
out and
rich.
actually celebrate
Yeah,
things that uphold their values when
here's
all
what
they
I
do
would
is complain
say.
about things that
Yeah.
don't have their values? And those movies with the weird,
I think
fractured
that
stories, like they made The
Israeli
Craft too, I'm like, they don't
influence
do.
makes people cringe. Well, two reasons. First of all, Israel's a pretty small country, so like them having this I mean, they have an outsized influence in U.S. politics, I think, because of the widespread lobbying and the fact that most Americans are pro-Israel, including a lot of like Christian groups that have certain ties with Israel. But the other issue is that there's sort of this historically things like Jewish influence, not Israeli per se, but Jewish influence have been used to talk about it's been used to promote conspiracy theories about how Jews want to control the world, how Jews are nefarious, or the elder protocols of Zion and stuff like that. Like just like these negative things. And like no, obviously Israel's a country that exists in the world. They have an intelligence agency, they have foreign policy, they have ambassadors. Like they have some influence in the world for sure. Um, and maybe even like a lot of influence in the United States, for instance, and maybe even like in Germany, I think they have a lot of influence too, because a lot of Germans feel bad about the Nazi stuff, and they feel like they owe Israel like reparations to an extent. But it makes people uncomfortable to say like, or at least makes me uncomfortable. I don't know, but I'm talking for other people, but to talk about like Israeli influence because of the long history of things like that being used to promote anti-Semitism. Like unless like we're talking about like specifically the Israeli embassy is encouraging this, Mossad conducted this intelligence operation here. Like yeah, sure, like we can point to specific things and like we can talk about that, but when we bring up like Israeli influence, like you brought up like 3 or 4 times in this conversation, including about like Irish politics, and it just seems a little weird. I'm not saying you're anti-Semitic or anything. I'm not making accusations like that. I'm just saying it seems a little bit weird, and I'm not sure why you think Israel has this big influence on like Irish politics and Irish immigration policy. Like I don't think Israel gives a shit about the immigration policy of Ireland. Or if they do, it's like a very minor interest. Like the United States has minor interests in a large number of topics. But I don't think it's like some nefarious thing. Also, why are all of all of the Kellers? Turn off Team Kellers. There's a way to do that. Israel is a political powerhouse. They have a huge amount of influence in Russia, China, and the U.S. are some of the biggest hitters. And you feeling cringe before talking about Israel as kind of part of the psyop. I don't think it's a psyop. I think it's that people have used phrases like that to promote anti-Semitism and hatred of people before. And like that you're doing that now, but that people have used that. And also Israel's like such a small country. Like, why would they give a shit about the immigration policy of Ireland? Like, why would you blame the Israelis or the Zionists for that in particular? They very much do. Why would they care? The rabbis have consistent in the video that they use it. Oh my God, dude, I don't know, man. They use immigration to weaken their. I'm not. We're getting into some weird conspiracy theory territory here. We can talk about something else if you want, but I'm not going to talk about the. Yeah, I don't know what you've seen that's led you to think this, but. Who's they? Who's they? Are you talking about like an individual rabbi, or what are you talking about? I don't think it's the state policy of the state of Israel to encourage widespread immigration into Europe by Muslims in order to promote. Like, that sounds like you're talking about like crate replacement conspiracy theory stuff.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, they're not culturally significant.
They got mad. I went and saw the new Indiana Jones, and I got like crap for it just because like it was woke or something because there was a female protagonist. Which, you ever seen those movies? I mean, that's like always a trope, and people are like, oh, it's woke. She's such a girl boss. But that's kind of the point. Is, you know, this girl is so prideful and annoying that her like literally 80-something-year-old godfather has to come in and like, you know, show her how it's done, and because he is the adventurer, he is Indiana Jones.
They got rid of Shia LaBeouf.
And you notice too, a lot of the like more like woke film critics don't like that movie, and I think it's because Indiana Jones and James Bond, these kind of franchises are like one of the last sort of authentic displays of like real adventure or like a hero archetype that like men have to project themselves onto. Because now if you look at like Captain America, like you mentioned, what that has devolved into is like Captain America fights for gay rights and stuff like that with the whole like MCU. And I just don't think that that's as good of a role model for like what masculine leadership looks like.
I feel like for some of these things, firstly, I hate analyzing this as left wing versus right wing. I think it's the most weirdly politics brain thing. I think that there are good TikTok movies or bad TikTok movies. Trying to figure out if it's like right or left is kind of strange. Something that I'll be a little bit critical of conservatives on is sometimes, and I understand maybe because there's not good leadership in the Republican Party right now because there's a huge split between DeSantis and Trump and who knows what else is going on, is sometimes I think it would be better if conservatives could frame things positively rather than like attacking everything. Because sometimes it feels like they don't have a good, like, what would better representation be? Instead it's just like, I don't like that there are so many black characters. I don't like there's so many female characters. I don't like the man did this or that or that. It makes me wonder sometimes there are classic movies that I consider 10 out of 10 movies that if they were to be released today, I feel like conservatives call them woke. I feel like legitimately, I'm not saying it's an opinion, this is a fact if you disagree, you're wrong. Mulan was an amazing movie.
Yeah.
I feel like if Mulan got released today, I think conservatives would universally pan it. Wow, a woman steps into a man's job, robbing honor from her father, and fights just as good as the men do. She even beats up the men. Women aren't that strong. Women can't do that. That's not even, and it's emasculating as hell that she beats the boss and says, like, I feel like that would be the criticism. Like, damn, I don't know. That seems kind of sad.
I agree with the point. The beginning.
True. I'm not even sure you could make like Alien today without conservatives saying it wasn't woke, wasn't woke. I mean, obviously, a lot of conservatives today love Alien and Terminator and speak very highly of these films about how you can have female representation in films and do it right, including having strong female characters. But I'm not sure if those movies came out today that they would say the same thing.
Story? Mulan?
Well, it's like a folktale.
This is what I'm saying. Captain America comes out. It's a Marvel film about a guy who's trying to lie his way into the military to serve his country. And where were the conservatives to be like, this is the perfect example of masculinity, Hollywood? So here's what happens. There is no positive signaling from the right on what they do like, only negative signaling on what they don't like.
Yeah.
And how does a movie theater, a movie studio react to that other than, hey, when we do this thing, all these people are cheering from this, ignore the haters.
Yeah.
If the conservatives came out and they were like, hey, look, Sound of Freedom is a good example. It beats Indiana Jones on a Tuesday. Obviously, Indiana Jones has like 85 million plus, but for the Tuesday, Sound of Freedom did really, really well, creating an opportunity for studios to pursue these types of movies. A positive reaction is better in terms of growing culture than a negative one.
Well, we kind of had that with Top Gun Maverick. I think that was kind of like returned to his like, you know, wholesome male lead character hero archetype, very pro-American Americana, kind of jingoistic with all the fetishization of the military, in my opinion. But I mean, that's a pretty right wing movie.
There was even like you mentioned, conservatives, and I think this is by our nature. I don't know how we would ever get around this. We don't know anything except for what we don't like. Maybe it's because the values that enabled the society that we want to conserve to exist, we don't exactly embody ourselves, which is why, like Destiny mentioned, if a movie came out nowadays that was very popular back in the day, we'd be like, oh, there's too many female characters, too many black characters. But at the same time, we wouldn't actually want to make a movie without that, because it'd be like, well, we don't want to be racist because we are so like cocked to the morality of the left. But the same thing with Top Gun Maverick, like conservatives liked that, but they liked it because it wasn't woke, which is to say it wasn't anti-America, it wasn't like over the top with like diversity, equity, inclusion, stuff like that. But there are more subtle themes of that movie, which I do find this fascinating, like a left-wing versus right-wing analysis.
I don't think it's so much left or right versus like subversive or upholding of traditional values.
I think that is in itself left and right. Like just as that even, but like with Top Gun Maverick, you've got this character who is kind of like James Bond in the sense that like he's obviously top of the league, he's excellent, he's competent, but he also maneuvers around like this sort of bureaucracy that's like, no, you have to do this way, you have to do this way, kind of makes his own rules, and people really like enjoy watching that. This sort of like guy who is like very competent at his job and doesn't have to be governed by this sort of like algorithmic process which most men nowadays have to follow. So I think that is very like inspiring to them to see that displayed. But a conservative wouldn't understand that. They would just watch and be like, oh, the plane, but they wouldn't understand like why they like it, which is why Hollywood's like, oh shoot, they like this movie because America and planes. Well, let's make another. Let's make a reboot.
Doesn't make money. Yeah, with Bud Light, Starbucks, Target, I think you're starting to see companies get worried about leaning too hard into maybe not simply pride stuff, but politics in general.
Maybe, yeah. You have to keep in mind that this is kind of a forever losing battle, is that if you have media or products that are focused on like diversity and inclusion, by default, you're going to have a much larger fan base. And that's something that conservatives kind of have to factor in.
But it's not just about diversity and inclusion, because if you look at the Fast and Furious movies, those are diverse. They're totally diverse. I've not heard a single person call those movies woke. So there's a difference between wanting a broad audience and understanding this global market versus, oh, now this Viking Jarl is a black woman. Like, they're different.
That's one of the good things for, I want to say almost every Tom Cruise movie I've ever seen. I don't know if Tom Cruise is involved firsthand in like declaring this or not, but I feel like almost like there are a lot of good female women characters in a lot of the movies he's in. Where but did you see the Edge of Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good movie. The strongest character, arguably, is a woman, except for Tom Cruise, but you never ever get the inkling of wokeness from that movie ever. In Top Gun, though, one of the pilots is a woman. I think the one and there's never a scene where she's like, I could do it better than the boys.
Right,
that's it. It's not just about having strong female characters, which have existed in movies for a long time. Like, I mean, the Aliens movie, that's not a problem. I think it's when that's coupled with the undermining of men. That's, I think, what makes it woke and what people don't like.
Yeah, like that's the left falling into the same trap as the right, where we have this horrible problem as humans, where we can never just like something without shitting on the antithesis of it as well. It's not enough to be a PlayStation gamer. You also have to hate the guys that play Xbox.
Yes.
So it's not enough to empower women. You have to shit on men at the same time, And there are so many scenes in some of the empower. Yeah, because you go back like Sarah Connor from the Terminator movies, or Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in the Alien movies. These are amazing representations of women, and there were.
Oh, I did not pre-watch. But he brought up the same exact point that I just did.
Or Kill Bill, even. They're modern examples too. Yeah, where you don't have those woke moments where, the woman is outperforming the guy, and it's like, this is why I don't need a man.
I think Hunger Games did a really, really great job of having a female lead.
She was the first ever female action star. Did you know that? Jennifer Lawrence said that. So.
Oh, I remember that.
That's so absurd. Jeez. This is the
I think that was a misspeak, to be fair. I did see that interview, but yeah, she apologized for that.
Think about the Hunger Games arc as compared to a traditional hero's journey of a man. Katniss Everdeen does not want to go to war, does not want to be a hero, and desperately tries to stop her involvement in the conflict. I thought that was a really interesting take on a female perspective in an action movie, whereas the guy is usually like, I have to go and do this, or else the world will end. And Katniss Everdeen is like, I don't want to go to war with you. Keep doing it. I'm protecting my family. I thought that was fantastic.
That's the thing too, is like she doesn't.
Oh, welcome to the Discord, by the way. Did you we wanted to come in and talk about something? And what in particular? Not the Jew thing or the Israeli thing. That we can have a conversation about that some other time. I'm not even sure we can talk about that on YouTube. Okay, for one. So like maybe if we're streaming off something else, but on Kick or something. But because I'm willing to debate people on just about like any topic, but this is a lazy Sunday stream for me, so I'm not ready to jump into taking on people about Jewish stuff like that right now. Maybe we could have a debate in a few weeks about that. But if there's something else you want to talk about in particular, we can have the conversation.
fill like the male archetype for that situation. Like you said, she acts like a woman, but she also is able to succeed. I mean, she's not like dealing with the conflict and just like, I am stoic. I mean, she's breaking down crying. She's exploiting her beauty to like get sponsors and, advance further to protect her family, which is noble. I mean, we're not saying that like females are incapable of nobility, but you're exactly right. I mean, they tell the story without people in the audience being like, wait a minute, they're trying to cast, her as a male character. And that's weird. I think that's what it is like watching the film, watching the characters and being able to tell that the way this character is behaving is unnatural. They're doing this because they're trying to pretend that like everybody's equal and, we can all just sort of like plug ourselves in where we will. It's another piece of media that came out, is very popular a couple years ago that was right wing. Squid Game. Remember Squid Game?
Oh, totally right wing.
Because
and these finish your point. I got to rant on this.
They people were like, oh, it's like this critique of capitalism. I'm like, okay, well that's kind of right wing. But then it was also like the way the characters were being successful.
Map to play. I'd be totally cool playing that, but I don't want to play it on stream. 2 reasons. First of all, I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be going for, and that's a huge, huge, huge commitment. A huge commitment to play that map. It's such a long map. Two is I don't know if it's a map that requires a lot of diplomacy and you interacting with other players, and I don't think that's probably best to do on stream either, because I might not be giving my full attention. I'll be watching other stuff in the background, having other conversations in the background, and I can't devote 100% of my attention to it. So, really fun map. So is the Stargate one, by the way. The Stargate map, like that's very similar to the Star Trek Armada map, but so it's the Discord where you're able to talk about everything but Israel, huh? Well, oh man, well, we can talk about Israel. Like we want to talk about like Israeli politics, the settlements in the West Bank, the conflict right now between like the Israelis and the Palestinians. Like yeah, 1,000%, like that's fine, but no, I don't really want to talk about. It's not even the Discord; it's the YouTube. Like I'm not sure what Discord and YouTube probably both have rules about anti-Semitism, so I wouldn't want to. But yeah, I mean, part of the reason I made the channel is I want to debate people, because I watched Destiny's videos. I watched a lot of his videos, and like other people too, like Stardust and a few other people who like went into like the alt-right spaces and would like debate these people where they are, like also Red Pill, stuff like that. So they're willing to debate these people, and they're like the only ones doing it. Like very, very few people would be doing it. And so the people I think in these echo chambers, not talking about you in particular in an echo chamber, but like the people in like the alt-right echo chamber, like they would only ever hear people who hold the same view as them. And all of their interactions with the left, or even like moderate, like conservative people, were people who wanted them gone, like wanted them banned from every single platform. And some of the people on the left who criticized them without ever debating them, of course, but criticized them were people who were like kind of the cringe SJW types who who would just like scream at them, "Oh, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi," rather than like actually take on the points that they were making. So part of the reason I wanted to make this channel too was so that there'd be other people out there who would go into like the alt-right or red pill spaces and square up with them, like not in like a mean way, but like in a having a conversation way, and debate them and show them that there's another way. Like not the, I don't think most of like the alt-right YouTubers and stuff like, if there are any left, but like the alt-right like political content creators, I don't think most of them are probably going to change their minds. But I feel like a lot of people in their audience, they are only hearing one message. And I think it would be good if they heard a positive view of what the left can be. Like a left that's pro-free speech, a left that believes in that some of the wokeness has gone too far, and that you don't have to be a crazy woke person, you know, right? But if you're going to live in a democracy, if you're going to live in America, at least I don't know about Ireland, but if you're going to live in America, right, you have to accept the idea that, okay, there's going to be people of different ethnicities here, different religions here, and that's part of what makes this country what it is. And that's a good thing. And there's a lot of positive aspects to it. There's also some negative aspects too. Like there could be certain divisions that come about because of that, and we should work to mend those divisions rather than exacerbate them. And I want people on like the far right to hear that message, and maybe some of them will change their mind. But that's not the only thing I made this channel for. It's not like I made this channel just so I can debate the far right. Like, no, I don't want to be like a debate bro who's like, that's their entire shtick. I want to do like other stuff too, play video games, talk about just random stuff. Obviously, I'm just starting out. I just made this channel. I mean, I made the channel like 10 years ago, but I just started streaming again after like a 5 or 6 year hiatus, or maybe a little bit sooner than that, but like roughly like 4 or 5 years hiatus. And yeah, like just started like 3 or 4 days ago. So we'll see how it all works out. First stream had a really active chat, a bunch of people in it. This one, it's a fun chat. I got 2 people here, but whatever you say, Rabbi Tachyon. Well, willing to debate does not mean censoring. Destiny would censor them given half the chance. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true that Destiny would censor them. Like, I'm pretty sure he he has far right people on his channel all the time. Like, maybe in his perfect utopian world he would, but I don't think that's the case, because he has talked about before that he thinks that the social media companies are a bit too pro censorship. Now, I don't know if he'd go and say that like, every single social media company has to platform every single view no matter what. I don't know if that would be his position. But he has criticized social media companies for engaging in censorship too much in the past. And I'm pretty sure his current view, I know like 5 years ago, he was a bit more pro censorship, or like maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. But he has come out and said that he was wrong to hold those views, and he has publicly changed his mind on that. So maybe if you saw his older stances from like 4 or 5 years ago, then he was pro censorship. But he's actually come around and changed his mind. And actually, so have I. When I was in Gamergate, I was like more of a free speech absolutist, and then there was a period of time where I was like, look, I'm free speech absolutist when it comes to the government, but I'm actually kind of open to there being censorship of like the extreme far right stuff. Like when you saw like Richard Spencer get real big, like 5 or 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was. I was like, okay, maybe the free speech absolutist thing isn't the right approach. Like on social media platforms, that they should be able to censor people. And they're private companies after all, so who really cares? And like if they're Nazis, who really cares? But I've seen so much where the social media companies will censor people over relatively mild statements, for one, and two, my philosophy on it has changed too. There was a time, like for like 2 or 3 years, where I was like, okay, like most stuff should be allowed, but like if you're promoting like Holocaust denial and stuff, maybe not. But now I'm completely 100% pro free speech absolutist on social media. I've changed my view on that because I think that if we're going to live in a democracy, we have to have freedom of speech. And that doesn't just mean in the government. It means having a culture of freedom of speech, a culture of hearing each other out, a culture of the idea that, look, we disagree, but you're a citizen, I'm a citizen. We can have disagreements and have conversations and try to change each other's mind, and that's good. And when you give up on that, you give up on the entire premise of democracy. And right now, the biggest social media companies are a major public forum when it comes to democracy. So it's not just oh well, you have the freedom of speech to hold a sign outside, but we're going to ban you from every social media site. Like, okay, your potential to get your views expressed is vastly diminished in that case. It seems like you've like been nuked off the face of the earth. So these are basically these social media companies now are so big that they have become a public square, I feel, and that they have to have some law in place that says that they have to be viewpoint neutral. Now, they can still ban people for harassment. They can ban people for doxing. They can ban people for posting porn if it's like a child-friendly site or whatever, right? Like Facebook, you don't want to have a porn, they don't have to have porn, right? You can have certain restrictions, but they have to be viewpoint neutral restrictions. Neutrally applicable laws or rules that apply to everybody, not only one side or only one viewpoint. But no, I think we have to have free speech on social media. And like it gets complicated when you want to make a law like that because, well, what is social media? How do you define that? Is World of Warcraft social media? Right? But I think you can just say like any of the largest platforms, any platform that has like more than 2 billion users or 1 billion users or whatever arbitrary threshold you want to set, that they have to be viewpoint neutral. And I would support a law like that. I think he hasn't come around. He has accepted what he must in order to continue his message. It's similar to how religions are all about having a conversation about belief, but look at what happens when they're in power. Suddenly there's no conversation. Watch what these organizations do when they have power. Destiny is a snake. I'm actually fine with platforms banning any kind of speech. The only rule is they need to be clear about it. No right wing, no X opinion, no white people, whatever. The problem is they don't. the vagueness of rules and their political stance is the biggest problem, but that's by design. Ambiguity is the soil of tyranny. Nazis used that. That's why anyone who opposed the state was suddenly a Jew. See, I actually don't think that they should be able to set whatever rules, even if they're clear. Like, even if Facebook had a giant post that said, you can talk about anything unless you're pro-life. Like, everything else is cool, but no pro-life stuff. Like, if that was the only thing that they had. And they were very upfront, right at a big banner right on their website, very clear, right in their terms of service, right at the very front. No pro-life stuff. I still think that would be wrong. And I think that Facebook is so big that if you want to talk about pro-life stuff on other platforms, that, well, if it's just Facebook, maybe it's okay. But the problem is it's never just one platform. All right, it's usually like 5 or 6 platforms that all will nuke somebody at the same time, or they'll all have very similar rules or moderators or interpretations of rules. So like you'll see people get banned from, like you'll have a book get pulled from Amazon for being quote unquote transphobic, and then you'll see somebody get banned for saying something quote unquote transphobic on Twitter, and then you'll get banned from YouTube for saying something transphobic, and it's like, okay, now you've been, or maybe not YouTube, but Twitch for sure. Like Destiny got banned from Twitch for being quote unquote transphobic, even though he wasn't. Like, so it's like, okay, now you've been nuked from 3 major platforms. Like, it seems like your your ability to participate in the public conversation has been drastically diminished to an extent that should be unacceptable in a free society, to me. Also, hey Trevor, what's up? I've given up trying to get platforms to be free speech. They never will be. The only hope is to get them to be transparent about their stances. I mean, maybe that's an outcome that can happen, too. Like, I don't know, because would well, not now, but like, would Twitter prior to Elon, let's say, be like, okay, here's our open thing. We're not going to allow all of this stuff, but it's like some massive list of like 30 different topics that you can't talk about. Like, would they do that? I mean, they might, right? They just sneak it into their terms of service that nobody reads, right? Just put it right in the middle of their terms of service. And they'll be like, oh, we're open about it. It's in the terms of service. Unless you want to require them to go some extra mile in regards to making it clear what their view is. But yeah, I mean, if you think Dusty's a snake, that's cool. I mean, whatever. Like, I'm not friends with the guy or anything, but I do generally like his content and agree with probably most of his stances. And he, along with other people, inspired me to do this. So I generally have like a relatively high opinion of him, but other people disagree. That's 1,000% fine.
Wasn't like, a girl boss. Like, there were the women characters who were using like their beauty and their sort of charm to like seduce the male characters. It was like, might is right. I mean, the stronger ones were winning until they were stupid and uncalculated, like that big guy who ended up getting killed by the woman on the glass panel one. Sorry, spoiler, it's been 2 years. Watch the stupid TV show.
Only 2 years?
Yeah, so I think it's fall 2021.
Okay, I got around on this because when the movie came out, I was
Daylight says, most people I talk to don't believe me about Google and Facebook biases, but if they legally had to say, we don't accept anti-immigration posts or some other thing, then you could just point to that. I mean, that's true, right? Like, it makes it so it's clear, right? So that nobody it would end the argument, right? You can't have people say like, oh, well, this thing is, you can't talk about that. They have this bias on Facebook, this bias on Twitter, and then they're like, well, yeah, not really. Where's the proof? It's not in their terms of service. Where's the proof? And usually, the way that these moderating sites work is, you'll know somebody, or you'll follow a page, or you'll follow somebody, and they'll get banned for doing something. And it appears, and we don't usually know what they get banned for, it appears that it's for this specific thing. And the companies don't usually comment on it. And so you could say, oh, well, look, this particular example of somebody getting banned. And they're like, oh, well, we don't know that they got banned for that reason. Sure, that's 1,000% real. And oftentimes the person who got banned doesn't even know either, because the companies don't want to talk about it. So maybe that would be an improvement I'd be open to that, and I'd also be open to having, like, if we're gonna have a law that did require them to be free speech, and someone did get banned, let's say they got banned for engaging in harassment or whatever, or allegedly, or spam or whatever it happened to be, I'd be fine with there being in the law some sort of rule that you have to have an appeals process. Now that appeals process can be up to the company, right? It can be a group of other users review it, or it can be that it goes to some moderator commission or whatever. I think Facebook actually does this. Facebook has a Facebook Supreme Court, right? So they do have some appeals process in place. I think there probably has to be when you're talking about social media companies like this that are this big, a certain size, 1 billion users or more, 2 billion users or more, something like that. But that would genuinely lose them users, similar to how Coca-Cola had to say they were anti-white. I mean, shit, man. Like, there probably are like some companies that have made some dumb statements. Like, I don't know. I don't know if any company has actually said they're anti-white, but I know companies, or at least I suspect. I don't want to say I know. I suspect there have been probably a lot of weird diversity trainings, including ones that like I've experienced and seen before, where they talk about like whiteness as like a bad thing, or what? Actually, I don't think I've ever seen that specifically, but not in my real life. I've ever seen that, but I think I've seen things on social media that people have shared, which I don't know. I can't verify that these are real or not, but people have shared like, "Hey, I'm taking this online training at work, and one of the slides is talking about how like whiteness is an imperialist concept or whatever." Like it's like weird, crazy shit like that. Like, I'm sure there have companies that have diversity trainings that are like that, which is wild. But many are, and they don't have to announce it, which is fucked. Coca-Cola made their employees had to go through getting rid of their white. I mean, I saw that story when it happened. I didn't research like super hardcore, but from my understanding, it was a little bit more complicated than that. Like, yes, I think they did actually promote a training like that, but it's because they like purchased a large package, a training package, like in general, that had a bunch of required stuff in it, which the employees were required to do. And then the company that made the package also included in some optional trainings that were not required. And like one of the optional trainings was the racist one. And like it like linked to yeah, I don't remember the story completely. This was like 5-6 years ago or something, but I do remember seeing it. It was a little bit more complicated than they just like forced all of their employees to undergo like this racist training program. So I don't know if the Coca-Cola executives or anybody like that even knew that this racist thing was in there, right? Because it was included as part of like a wider diversity, equity, and inclusion package that they purchased. I just want their Coke cans to say it so everyone can see that bullshit and not buy. All right, fair enough. Hey, they'll put on the cans it's not okay to be white or something.
Like, wow, this is a huge critique of communism. And I get all these leftists being like, Tim's so dumb. The guy who made it said it was a critique of capitalism. And I'm like, then this guy doesn't know anything about communism or capitalism.
Yep.
Let's use the red light, green light scenario, because it's been a long time since I watched it, but this was a really great example. In which system, contestants, are you likely to find everyone wearing the exact same clothes, starting from the exact same position, and then being told, good luck? A capitalist system or a communist system? Because in a capitalist system, some people are born wealthy. That means they would be born with tools and advantages halfway across the room already and not have to start from the back.
Yep.
If everyone's forced to dress the same, start from the same position, no matter how old or whatever, that is more of a forced equality system than some people are naturally benefited.
Hold up. Okay, hold on. I have not seen this, but I'm still going to fight with this take. Okay, ready? I've never watched this single episode. Real quick. There is a place in the most capitalist country in the world, or one of them, the United States, where you can find a scenario like that, and it's prison, where people tend to start behind, they're all given the same clothes, blah, blah, blah. Wasn't the point of the Squid Game show, you're talking about the Squid Game show, right?
Yep.
Or I don't even know the movie show. Wasn't the point of it was that every single person there had some big problem, and that's why they were there?
They're all facing debt.
Okay, yeah. So then that is more of like people fucked up first, and then kind of like instead of going to prison, you go to the Squid Game to, I guess, like get money or whatever. So that, I don't know if I would say it's a fair. That feels like pretty capitalist to me. That a bunch of people that get fucked in life and debt are now in another fucking rat race where they've got to, try to fight.
But that's not unique to capitalism.
It'd be
The
like
fact that-
I'm
not saying it's unique to capitalism, but
as far as that's
the-
usury,
the-
that's like loans, which people on the right don't like.
The idea that the scenarios,
Yeah.
the idea that
No.
I mean, the Catholic Church banned that. That's why.
How do you buy a house?
People on the right don't like loans. Like is he talking about like the far right? Because most conservatives, at least historically, I don't know about now, have been extremely pro-capitalism and, well, pro-financial deregulation. In fact, the Republican Party today is still very pro-deregulation of the financial sector. So, in fact, that just like 2 years ago, they overturned part of, under Trump's administration, they just overturned part of Dodd-Frank, I believe. Or they tried to. I'm not sure if it passed. Okay. Okay, so yeah, it passed by, what was it? Just had to most congressional support for Dodd-Frank came from the Democratic Party. 3 senators from the Republican Party voted for the bill. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure there was an effort to repeal or at least curtail Dodd-Frank. Was it this? The bill eased financial regulations imposed by Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act after the financial crisis of 2007-2008. Specifically, the bill raised the threshold from 50 billion to 250 billion, under which banks are deemed too big to fail. The bill also eliminated the Volcker rule for smaller banks with less than $10 billion in assets. The Volcker rule of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The rule was originally proposed by American economists and former United States Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker to restrict United States banks from making certain kinds of speculative investments that do not benefit their customers. Volcker argued that such speculative activity played a key role in the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. The rule is often referred to as a ban on proprietary trading by commercial banks, whereby deposits are used to trade on the bank's own accounts, although a number of exceptions to this ban were included in the Dodd-Frank law. The rule's provisions, which were scheduled to be implemented as part of the Dodd-Frank Act on July 21, 2010, with the preceding ramifications but were delayed. On December 10, 2013, oh, hang on, I'm not screen sharing the article. But were delayed. On December 10, 2013, the necessary agencies approved regulations implementing the rule, which were scheduled to go into effect on April 1, 2014. Okay. All right, thanks, Daylight. Have a good one. And hey, if you want to debate that stuff later on at some other point off stream, like that's part of the reason I made this channel, to have those kinds of debates with people. And maybe I could change your mind on some stuff about the Israelis controlling the immigration policy of Ireland or whatever. Like, but anyway, have a good night. Good conversation. Take care.
No, I understand traditionally like usury is better. Like I'm pretty sure Catholics want to
Not
borrow
the
money,
Jews,
right?
Well, I mean, you want to borrow money, but we disavow usury. We don't like usury, like loaning with high interest rates,
What
exploiting
is a high
people.
interest rate? Exploiting. I mean,
Well, think about it this way: like the way that people perceive money nowadays, I don't like with student loans. I sympathize with the idea of them being forgiven because I don't think that people understand how interest works, how money
Yeah,
works, and
yes.
so credit card companies know this. I mean, these people, it's predatory. I don't like predatory.
wait, so do you think
lending.
people should never be able to borrow money?
Absolutely not. I think that and I don't know what the exact number is, but there is something to be said about people exploiting people's desperation and need for money and trapping them into debt for more or less the rest of their
Wait,
lives.
so how do we buy houses or cars?
I'm not saying that lending in itself needs to be outlawed. I'm simply
who's going
saying
to lend money if you don't get interest on it?
Squid Game. The amount of debt you have to be in Squid Game. I'm saying that type of lending is predatory. It's obvious before you make that amount of or that loan that this should have been taken into account. You can sort of tell what the people's circumstances are. I think that should more or less be outlawed. I think that's absolutely wrong. I'm not saying you have your 20%, 10%, 5%, buy a house, but I'm saying like these high interest rates, like 20, 30% for credit cards, student loans, things like that, should absolutely be discouraged, not allowed.
These are not components of Squid Game, right?
They were in debt though, right?
Yeah, they're all in debt. And they're competing for a lot of money.
I don't think they were all in debt. I think
they were all
was,
competing for money.
Right. There was a big thing that filled with money or whatever.
Yeah.
But the idea that it's a critique of capitalism is incorrect because to be fair, as to try and give someone the benefit of the doubt, the movie is a critique of authoritarian corruption and centralized
You keep saying movie. It was a show, right?
Yeah, it's a show.
Oh, it was a show.
It was a show.
Oh, sorry. It was a show.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Okay, yeah, but yeah.
There you go, show.
Sure.
But the general idea is you get these people saying, and even I guess I got created, it's a critique of capitalism because there were powerful people who are controlling and manipulating people this way, and I'm like, that's not what capitalism means.
Yeah.
Communism being the political structure. I'm not saying it was a socialist film. I'm saying the idea of private trade versus public trade is not necessarily a component of what I'm criticizing. I'm saying authoritarian control that puts people on the same clothing and then drops them off and exploits them is not what capitalism is. You can call it corporatism. You can say it can arise from an unchecked capitalism. But if we're actually talking about private ownership versus public ownership, that's not what Squid Games was criticizing.
Yeah, there's this interesting phenomenon where people will try to make art that is conveying like a left-wing message, but then the audience perceives it much differently and ends up liking it. Like you'll see, my favorite example
Fahrenheit
is
451.
Alan Moore, I think, is the author who wrote Watchmen, and you've got this Rorschach character who was written expressly to be this like bad guy, this fascist character, and everyone like loves Rorschach. I mean, I watched that movie for the first time at the advice of my friend. I was like, he's literally me. I mean, he's like this moral absolutist. He's like complaining about liberal hippies and all this other stuff as the crime and everything infests the city. Far Cry 5, you've got
Rorschach is such an amazing character. Like he's obviously meant to be, like exactly like he says, a moral absolutist who is just like extremely conservative, has an extreme views on what exactly is right and wrong, and extreme punishments for what he views as wrong. But like such an interesting character case study of just a well written character. You actually like them, and they're obviously one of the heroes of the story, insofar as Watchmen has any heroes, really. But it's such an interesting, well done character who's like obviously like somewhat evil, though they're all fairly evil, and are fairly not evil, but broken. A fairly broken character, very morally gray character, but very well done.
Got that one song like "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side." They write that to make fun of "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side." They write that to make fun of like Christian conservative homesteaders. It's like an anthem now. Everyone loves that
same
song.
with Fortunate Son. Like a lot of people think of it as like, oh, this like pro-America. Is like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, like, I would say conservatives aren't above analyzing things incorrectly too, though, right? How many conservatives? I think even at a fucking Trump rally, they play that Bruce Springsteen song, "Born in the USA."
Yeah.
I don't care how you look at it. You're never getting a pro-America song out of that, other than hearing the chorus over and over again.
I was going to say, Fahrenheit 451 was, there's a famous story where Ray Bradbury was like giving a lecture, and they interpreted it as the students interpreted it as the government censorship, and he was like, no, it's about the public demanding it, and they were like, no, you're wrong. He's like, I wrote this book. But in terms of Rorschach, this is really this is funny because I think Alan Moore, the writer, right, it was Alan Moore. He had said it was supposed to be a smelly, disgusting, like far right or whatever you want to call it. People weren't supposed to empathize with this character.
Yep.
The problem is Rorschach, his look. You want to make someone a bad character? Don't make their arc that they caught a guy raping and murdering children and it caused them to snap.
Yep.
Because no matter how awful the person is in terms of his moral absolutism, you are like, somebody witnesses something like that, I can understand them snapping. It's not a good character, but you're not going to feel hatred. You're going to feel like a sadness for what drove them to their menace. Not only that, whether it's the comic or the movie, when he's in the scene in the movie where the guy tries to kill him and he grabs the tray and blocks the knife and then splashes him with the boiling oil and says, I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me. This is a guy who was defending himself and then told him to back off. So by all means, criticize him and say he's supposed to be a bad character, but you write him in this way. Like, come on.
I mean, that's a sign of a good character, right? Like even like I would argue that the first Avengers movie with Thanos or whatever was written as a very sympathetic lead villain. Yeah, I would say that. Yeah,
I've heard right-wing commentators say that it's anything where there's like gray areas morally is leftist because of moral relativism. It's like, okay, I understand what you're trying to say, but a good villain will have their own justifications for what they're doing. Otherwise, it's just cartoon evil, and that's not interesting.
And we went a little bit over, so I'll end with my final thoughts. That's why Final Fantasy 16 is awful. It was a terrible game. I stand by this. Everyone's allowed to be mad at me. I won't spoil the game, but it is.
Wait, is this not the full show? When did they talk about Final Fantasy 16?
It is lower than one-dimensional. So yeah,
which isn't always bad though. I will say that there's a time and a place for Game of Thrones, which is incredibly seven-dimensional.
Yeah.
Okay, God bless the ending of that show was so fucking horrible. And there's also a time and a place for Lord of the Rings, which is incredibly one-dimensional. It's literally the biggest, baddest bad guy and the goodest. But it's like, yeah, there's a time and a place to enjoy different types of media. I think. Yeah.
I agree.